Welcome to Barnyard Language. We are Katie and Arlene, an Iowa sheep farmer and an Ontario dairy farmer, with 6 kids, 2 husbands, and a whole lot of chaos between us. So kick off your boots, reheat your coffee, and join us for some Barnyard Language. Honest talk about running farms and raising families.
In case your kids haven't already learned all the swears from being in the barn, it might be a good idea to put on some headphones or turn down the volume. While many of our guests are professionals, they aren't your professionals. If you need personalized advice, consult your people. Welcome back to another episode of Barnyard Language. And Katie, what's your update? What's happening on the farm? What's happening in the house?
We started recording this. The boy child, who is almost 4, got a very positive COVID test. He was home from daycare.
That line showed up real quick.
Oh yeah, before the control line even showed up. Daycare is actually shut down today and tomorrow anyway because so many staff are out sick that they don't have enough adults, let alone how many kids are out sick. Both of our kids' little neighborhood playmates are out with COVID. I'm assuming the girl child will get a positive test when we pick her up from school today. It seemed kind of pointless to pick her up early because everybody's already got it anyway. Other than that, cows running away and cows going back in, and Katie getting a real good workout putting the cows back in. Yeah.
How are your new lambs? Doing what lambs need to do?
Growing. No more new lambs yet, which is good, and knock on wood. Other than that, not much. How are you doing, Arlene?
Well, I'm feeling pretty good. The kids actually went back to school, and also going to knock on some wood, they have stayed there so far. So yeah, they're attending school. No COVID exposures yet, so we'll see how long that lasts. But for now, yeah, the house is empty during the day, which means that I can get a few things done. And my daughter went back to her co-op placement last week, so she worked on the farm where she was doing her co-op placement, which was good because she, between sickness and Christmas holidays and all that kind of stuff, it had been quite a while since she'd been able to go back to work there. So she was really happy. And they're not supposed to get paid for co-op because, I mean, that's the whole point. You're supposed to be learning for the experience. But she kind of got payment. And the farm where she stayed at, they offered her an embryo that they had from one of the cows that she really likes in their herd. So she was very excited. Not every kid is going to be excited about getting an embryo in their nitrogen tank, but they came and dropped her off and brought the tank with them. So she has her first embryo. So she's very excited about that. So it better catch when we get it implanted. So that was her excitement last week. And we ended up going on a small holiday. This past week there was a concert that didn't happen because we're still in lockdown here. There's nothing open. All the restaurants, gyms, basically everything is still shut minus schools. So we had an Airbnb booked for this concert that was not happening anymore, but we decided, well, a change of scenery is good too. So we had a little girls trip, went and stayed in a condo in downtown Toronto. So, I mean, the view is definitely a lot different from here. And it was so strange because the day we got there was windy and snowy and not ideal. So we just hung out in the apartment, and it was actually very convenient. There was a grocery store right in the basement of the same building. So we just went down and got food for supper and played games and stuff. But then the next day was nice and sunny, still cold. I mean, it's Toronto, but we walked down to the harbor front and around downtown a little bit, kind of in where there's the CN Tower and the stadium where the Blue Jays play, and there's an aquarium, and normally it's bustling and full of people, and there was no one there. We were the only people on the block at that moment. So it's very strange. It kind of feels like everyone got spirited away, but I guess everyone's working from home and are staying in their apartments. But it was a change of pace, change of scenery. So it felt good to get away, even if we didn't really do a whole lot.
We'll have to post a picture of your candy haul for your trip too. That was pretty impressive.
Yes, might as well have
really thinking ahead.
Yeah. Another thing I did last week was I attended virtually the Eastern Ontario Ag Women's Network annual meeting and conference. So that was fun. Just give a shout out for them. I also was reminded that my French is not as good as I thought it was. It's a bilingual organization because here in Eastern Ontario, we have a lot of English speakers, but a lot of French speakers as well. So their goal as an organization is to be fully bilingual. So they had one guest speaker who was French and two who were English. And I thought, oh yeah, I've got this. I understand French. I did French immersion in school, and I'm sure it was very good. And I tried to follow along, but she spoke a lot quicker than I could understand. But I'll get the translated notes later. I'm sure that I know it was about goal setting. So that was good to know. But so, I didn't get a whole lot more out of it.
You got a lot out of it because you're setting a goal to improve your French.
To improve my French,
time you'll know what's going on.
Get some of those language apps downloaded.
Yep. I'm sure your French is a lot better than mine, since I don't speak any, but,
Today, we'd like to welcome our first guest who isn't living and working in North America. Sara Yoshihara is a farmer, business owner, and parent in Yokohama, Japan.
So, Sara, what time is it there?
It is about 10 in the morning on Saturday.
Okay.
So I have the whole place to myself. We've been having earthquakes. Oh, dear, my voice. We've been having earthquakes, so I am a little afraid that an earthquake alarm will go off while we're talking. If I suddenly go under the table, you'll know why.
Yeah.
That's our interview got that stressful. She just went right under the table.
Welcome to the podcast, Sara. So as I think you might know, we start each episode with the same questions. So we'll start off the usual way. What are you growing?
Well, so we grow, our main crops are rice and black soybeans. And we use both of those in the bakery. And then we've started growing oats. So that's another big one. And we have chickens for eggs. And then it's just the chaos of, going through the seed catalog and wanting everything, going to the nursery and wanting everything. So that's sort of our situation. And then, of course, the kids, too. Everyone always mentions their kids, 15 and 19.
And so you have both a farm and a bakery. Do you want to tell us about what kind of those entities entail?
Yeah. So we have the farm as sort of the main thing. It's sort of where things started. And then the bakery is now a gluten-free bakery where our main product is brownies, or I was listening to your old episodes, so they might be squares or bars to the both of you because only some of them are chocolate. So we use the black soybeans that we grow on the farm. We have them roasted to a really dark, it's called kinako, which is a flavor that I think you guys probably get from exported stuff sometimes. So we'll use those in place of cocoa powder in some of the brownies, and everything is with our rice flour. And then we also, a few years ago, opened a cafe. So all of those vegetables that we can't help ourselves from growing go into the cafe. We have salads and pickles and all that kind of stuff going. So that's about it.
I'm just glad that some things are universal.
So how many acres are you on or growing on?
No, I was going to do this math and I forgot. I think it's around 2 acres. We don't actually own most of it. We've been sort of expanding as our neighbors retire. So every year we add a field here and a field there. And so the one thing that's a bit different is, where I grew up in Northern California. My parents lived on 20 acres out in the mountains of Northern California, whereas we have sort of a neighborhood and we have a few fields that are attached to where our farmhouse is. And then we have a field here and a field there sort of scattered around the neighborhood. So all together, I think it's around 2 acres, I think.
Sure. And then, but those are broken up into smaller chunks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so Sara, we know that you were born and raised in California. Why are you in Japan? I mean, it seems like a lovely place, don't get me wrong. But I assume there's some sort of a story that you didn't just wake up and we were like, I'm going to Japan, I'm out.
Well, no, not quite, but not so far. No, my husband is Japanese. We met in graduate school in Northern California. Neither of us finished. We met and then dropped out of graduate school. And then we tried a few things. And then we did just kind of one day wake up and say, it was the point when the housing bubble in the US was just going out of control. We're never going to be able to afford something here. What would it be like to live in Japan? We kind of looked it up and realized you could buy an old farmhouse for like a car price versus, $500,000 for like a shack in the United States at that point. And we just we thought, why not give it a try? And so 17 years later, here we are, I guess.
So what did the farm look like when you started? Did you move to Japan and start farming right away, or were you doing other things when you first moved back? Or like over 17 years, how has that kind of progression happened?
Yeah. Well, so when I first dropped out of graduate school, we moved my husband to a different graduate school. We had a couple of little containers on the balcony. And then the next house we moved to, we did maybe double that, a little garden in the backyard, double that. So then by the time we moved to Japan, we were like, well, maybe it's time to have some chickens. We'll have a garden. And our first year there, one of the neighbors had extra rice seedlings. So, well, I guess this year we're growing rice. And then, a few years later, one of the neighbors retired. So I guess now we have twice as many fields. And it's really just sort of kind of grown from there. But like I said, my parents had 20 acres out in the far mountains of Northern California. So I grew up having gardens. We had chickens. I did lambs with 4-H for a while when I was a kid. We had pigs. My parents had emus for a while. We're a real just like try it out sort of a family. And pretty much it's been that. And then at the same time, we were baking bread just sort of for fun. At the time, I was not gluten-free. So we were baking all these hearty, wheaty and rye breads. And the same neighbor that had the rice seedlings said, well, there's this little farmer's kitchen thing you can rent. We're doing events. Why don't you guys come and make something? So we made bagels and we started selling those at events. And so sort of as the farm expanded, so did, we used the rented kitchen. And I'm like, well, I guess we could build our own. And it just sort of same sort of thing. It just doubled from there every year, every 2 years. It just keeps growing all on its own.
So
sounds like you don't say no to very many things, though.
That is exactly the situation at my house. Yes.
For our listeners, we'll add a picture when we put the show up. But Sara, were you like 12 when you dropped out of graduate school, or is this genetics, or like she looks super young, you guys, and she's totally cute.
That is very sweet.
I'm feeling, yeah.
No, I have all the lights off. You can't see the gray hair, but it's there. No, what am I? 41. But no, I graduated high school a little young. I graduated college a little young. So I took some community college classes because it's cheaper that way. So I was 20 when I met my husband, which was much younger than I would have ever imagined settling down and getting married. But one of the things when you and your partner are from different countries is if you want to live together, you got to get married pretty quick if you want to stay in the same spot. So I was 22 when we got married, 24 when we moved here, and 41 now. I have grown-up children now. I have a 19-year-old and a 15-year-old.
Was your husband from a farming background as well, or is this a new lifestyle choice for him?
No. So the Japan side comes from his side of the family, and the farming stuff comes from mine. He's actually, his parents were both diplomats. They met at the UN in New York in the 1970s. And so he grew up sort of moving around every 3 or 4 years, moving to a different country. So he went to high school in the US and then stayed and did college and graduate school there, which is how we ended up meeting. But he more than I really wanted to raise our kids in one spot. So, he had moved around a lot when he was young. I did when I was very young, but when my dad was in the Navy when I was little, but from about age 10, I was in the same sort of area. He really wanted to be in one place, and gardening just sort of expanded and took over our lives. Less of a plan. He was actually studying mathematics when we met. Environmental systems mathematical modeling was the degree that he did not end up finishing. But yeah, we just sort of a hobby that took over our lives, really. Although food was my educational background is in food and agriculture and rural development.
Sure. So how do you divide up the work between the two of you with a cafe and a bakery and a farm and all of those types of things? What does that look like on the ground? Like who's doing what?
Yeah, well, so it's changed over the years, sort of as our schedules have changed. We initially had everything in one spot on the farm. We lived in an old farmhouse, and we built a log house kit next to the house where we started the bakery. And at that point, we would both work hands-on in the bakery, a lot of it at the same time. And then at that point, the farm was still relatively small, but we grew a little bit of wheat and we grew rye one year. And at that point, both of us did most everything a lot of time together, but you add kids into the mix and it's a lot harder for two adults to do the same thing at the same time. And we started splitting up. And at this point, we sort of deliberately give each other a lot of space. So we will sort of map out the overall direction together. But within that, we have pretty large areas where we're both just in charge. So the bakery itself is largely mine. So I'm largely in charge of the bakery, and I work about 20, 30 hours a week in the bakery doing some of the actual baking. And then I have a staff of 1, 2, 3. Right now it's 4 full-time people. It's going to go down to 3 full-time and 1 part-time person in the new year in the bakery. And then my husband does the cafe is mainly his responsibility. So there's him and 1 other full-time person there. So we both really kind of are hands off, except when asked for help with each of those. And then the farming, we really sort of have to squeeze in around the edges. So a lot of it comes down to scheduling. It's, so if it's an everyday thing, I'm at the farm almost every day. So then I do that. So I take care of the chickens, I do the eggs, I collect the eggs, and, do the seedlings, do all the watering. And he does a lot more of the one-time jobs. So like today is going to be tractoring all of the fields, get ready to plant the oats. He does that. And we really just sort of communicate over text a lot at this point. Our children don't necessarily like to let us sit quietly and discuss things. So we have within the company Slack, we have a channel that's just the 2 of us saying, well, today I got this far. If you can take over, that would be great. We're currently trying to coordinate between our schedules and the weather. We need to harvest the soybeans, but it rained again. So I don't know when we're going to do it. And maybe hopefully tomorrow, maybe it's going to be Wednesday. So we just spend a lot of time sort of chunking it in around the other set bits.
So I'm guessing based on what you're talking about in terms of field size and, like the variety of crops that you're growing, then your scale of equipment is a lot different than what, the typical North American farmer
Absolutely.
would picture. What does that look like?
So everything really is like much more person scaled. So we do have a nice tractor that has an air conditioned cab, but it's a 1-person thing. It's about the size of a car. It's not the size of a semi truck. I saw photos of your harvesting, and you have the big like semi truck size hoppers, whereas we have a little hopper that fits on our little tiny pickup truck. It's the super light kind of pickup truck that you'll see, like, I don't know if they're even road legal in the US. They're like these little tiny pickup trucks that you can drive around. So there's sort of much more a like 1-person scale sort of a thing. So the combines as well, we have sort of the big one. We have the big variety now, but that again is like maybe a little wider than a car. It's not like, you see the ones with the big wings. It's nothing like that. It's much more like everything fits on the small 1-lane road. We do have a few fields where nothing we own fits. I'm needing to buy like a small, either a more stable hand tractor or something very small riding that we can ride on, because we have some fields that we've taken over from the neighbors that like I can't get anything into. I can't even get the mower. I can only get the handheld weed eating thing in there. So it is indeed a very different scale.
Yeah.
What are the food laws like in Japan versus in the US, or do you have much food experience in the States to be able to compare it?
Well, I think I haven't done so much in the US. I think, I think in a lot of places in the States, you have sort of a home kitchen class where you can like sell at farmers markets. So we don't really have that. And they've been sort of formalizing things a bit lately. So there are a few things where they count as like farm products. So things like pickles you could sell without a specialized license, possibly until recently. That may have changed. But we have very strict sort of the type of goods that you're allowed to produce in the type of facility. So that's one of the reasons that we currently have 2 open kitchens, and then we're going to open a 3rd kitchen on the farm that will be, I believe technically it's soft drinks, although actually it's going to be for like a drink powder for like a soybean thing to mix with milk, but I think it's technically classified as soft drinks. So that part of it has been a little bit complicated, sort of the specific divisions to keep within the law. Mm-hmm. But there was things like when we had the bakery, you could not sell sandwiches. Sandwiches were considered a restaurant food rather than a bakery food. So there are little things like that.
Yeah, it's good to know that Japanese laws are just as random.
That is what it feels like. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I found out that in the state of Iowa, at least, you can sell hard-boiled eggs at farmers market as long as you don't peel them.
Right, exactly.
You're not opening it to hard boil it.
Yes, there was.
How is that possibly?
Yep. We have something similar where you can sell mixed greens and wash them as long as they're still connected to the base. But if you take the base off so that it's like a loose leaf salad mix, no good.
Family has grown through fostering and adoption, and what was that process like for you, especially in a country where Japanese is not your first language?
Yes. Well, so for us, it's meant that my husband has to handle a lot because he is literate and fluent in a way that I just am not. But actually, it was all relatively straightforward. We After we moved here, we got our house fixed up a little bit because it is a 100-year-old farmhouse. It did need it did need some there were some spots that needed floor and walls that needed patched up, but we got that done, and we just contacted our local city's, oh gosh, what would you call them? Like the child welfare agency.
Mm-hmm.
And they came out and did interviews and chatted with us, and we went to some classes, and people were very very helpful. So knowing that I might not understand things, sort of explaining things really really well and very helpful. It did take quite a lot longer than I sort of had expected. We moved here when I was 24, and I think our first daughter arrived when I was 29, and she was 2 years old when she came to us. So she's 15 now, and gosh, it's hard to know what to say and what is sort of like the kids' privacy space, isn't it? But she's, her situation was that she was legally able to be adopted, which was what we had stated as our initial preference, because our initial idea was that we would be able to adopt them, and then they would have dual citizenship and be able to go back and forth between the US and here. But a few years later, our second daughter was placed with us, and she was age 10. But her situation was that she was strictly a foster placement. So it was a long-term foster placement. So there was no instability. We knew she'd be staying with us through adulthood, but she maintained a relationship with her family of origin a bit. And because it was a strictly foster situation, rather than adopting, being able to travel with her was a bit more complicated. So we have ended up being much more based in Japan without being able to travel to see my family as much. But, that might have happened anyway. Because sometimes kids are hard to travel with and schedules are hard. Gosh, it's so much I don't, it's hard to know sort of what to say. But she was 10 when she came to us. She's 19 now. She has a few neurodivergencies. So the process of learning to just really support her has been a bit more, and learning to navigate on top of the foster care system, learning to navigate special education and the additional services and things has been a challenge, but she's doing really well. So I'm really proud of her. I think that's probably more her than me, but we're making it through. I don't know if you guys have more specific questions, I might be able to answer better. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. One of the questions I had was, like from someone who grew up in North America, how do you see the way your kids are growing up, as and comparing that to maybe how our kids are, how you grew up? What are the main differences that you see in Japanese society versus in North America?
Yeah, well, so a big one, especially the phase of life that we're in right now, has been the involvement of school, the level of the involvement of school. So my kids go to school, they start about 8 o'clock in the morning, and through junior high and high school, through a lot of it, they have after school club that'll meet every day after school, and then also on a lot of weekends. So whereas I went to school in junior high from probably 8:30 to like 2:30 or 3, my kids are gone from like before 8 in the morning until like 6 in the evening. Oh, yeah. For my particular kids, that's been great. One of my kids is super social, so all the time she can spend with other kids is wonderful. And for my older daughter, she's the structure and the familiarity of having her social life based at school has been good, but just the sort of the emphasis on the amount of time they spend at school versus home has been a little bit of a shock to my system.
Mm-hmm. And then I suppose there probably isn't time, like when I was in high school, I had part-time job, helped out on the home farm, things like that. I'm guessing that if they're in school for that many hours, there aren't as many opportunities for part-time work or even helping out on the farm. Is that that's right. There's a lot less emphasis on like doing even like doing home chores, but so like being able to help out on the farm, or a lot of high schools actually prohibit kids from having part-time jobs unless they get sort of a special permission to do it. Yeah. But also they'll have a much longer commute frequently because high school is not based on your location. So you'll test into the high school that sort of matches your level and your future plans. So there's a lot of focus on, the kids are really focused on their future and what they're going to do next, and much less focused on
Yeah, there's not a lot of time left for like doing chores or like independently making their own meals and things like that. So that also has been a
Right.
bit of an adjustment. Sort of the expectation of, of course, it's the expectation is on the mother. There are families that, where, both parents share it a bit more, but the expectation is that, the mom will get up early every morning and put breakfast on the table and pack everybody's warm lunch and always be available to come pick the kids up wherever they are, whatever time. I think that's shifting a bit, as time goes on, but
Mhm.
that sort of underlying expectation does remain a bit. And that is quite different from what I grew up with. I grew up, babysitting and having a part-time job. And through high school, I lived with my grandparents because my grandmother was ill. And so I would make dinner every night. So that's, there are of course cases where kids do that as well, but sort of the base expectation really is quite different.
Mhm. So are you in an area that is mostly rural, or are you near kind of major cities? I don't know a lot about the geography of Japan, so maybe just give a bit of context for where you
Yeah.
actually live and what that looks like.
That's right. Well, so we're sort of spread out. So we're in a small city. So the overall population of the city is about 1 million people. And the way sort of the geography of Japan works is that you have a lot of really steep mountains. And so all of the population is really kind of concentrated in valleys and along the coast. So the city we live in is along the coast, and then there's sort of a highway and a river and a railroad that run along together up into the hills. And so about a half an hour out of the city center, a half an hour, 45 minutes, things are really quite rural. We have a train stop about 15-minute drive, hour long, maybe a little more than that walk from where the farm is. And then about halfway between the farm and where we live, we have the bakery.
Mhm.
And then we have the cafe, and the apartment where we live now are both on kind of the northern edge of the city. It's a small city, but bigger than where I grew up in Northern California.
Yeah, 1 million
So
people
there's,
sounds pretty big to me, but probably for
yeah,
Japan it's not.
exactly. It's not like living in Tokyo. Basically, it's a smaller thing, but sort of the population density is quite different from what I grew up with. So
Sure.
like where I grew up with, you could have a house and see nothing around for miles, but where we are is considered, fairly rural, but you're sort of almost in a little neighborhood village. Like you can see several other houses. There's sort of the patchwork of fields. So everybody's sort of neighboring each other work-wise and living-wise. We all share the irrigation. There's like a lake out by, or a reservoir out behind the house. So we all communally work on that and keep that running. So it's sort of a different, more of like a very small little village focused agricultural community rather than more of like the sort of homesteading sort of vision you might have in California and maybe up where you folks are.
Sure. And when you talk about people retiring and then you taking over their properties, is that, they come to you and ask you if you want it, or like, how does that work in terms of the relationships within those, those other properties?
Yeah, so that's been exactly it. So it was sort of once we were established, the nearest neighboring fields, the man was probably in his 80s by then and looking to retire. So he said, well, how about you take over these? And then as we get more established, more of the neighbors sort of notice that that's a possibility. And
Right. They're checking
you have
you
sort
out.
of that's right. I hope we're doing okay. I sort of spend a lot of my time worrying I'm not keeping up with my, maybe things are too weedy and everyone's mad at me. I spend a lot of time worrying about that, but so far no one's kicked us out.
So most of those people are still living, on the land or in, close by, but then they've offered you the opportunity to actually do the farming part.
That's right. And it is sort of the way the land where we are works. It really is. There's bamboo, and that bamboo grass that grows into everything so fast. So if they were to just retire and not be able to do it anymore, it would be taken over by, and also the kuzu, right? So it'd be taken over by the bamboo grass and the kuzu in no time. So it's a reasonable trade, because they know that if they just let go of it, it'll be basically taken over within a year or two. So we do our best to keep up. That's right.
Mm-hmm. So you said that you live in an apartment now. So was that for the kids' schooling, or because at first you were living on the farm? What led to that part of the move?
Yeah, so it's both the kids' schooling and also Our beautiful old farmhouse is very old, and it actually has a thatched roof. And then over the top of that is tin. No one can really keep up a thatched roof anymore. And the tin is sort of slowly degrading. And about 5 years ago, maybe, we sort of realized it's all downhill from here. And we didn't want to be with the kids and suddenly have a leak all in one spot. So we moved we moved initially quite nearby so the kids could stay at their elementary school. And then my husband still stayed at the farm a lot. It was like maybe a mile apart. But when my youngest daughter was ready to start middle school, she wanted to go to a bigger school. And so it was either she would commute to the city to go to a bigger school, or we could all move to the city. And then my husband and I would commute out to the farm. So we went with that. And last year, 2 years ago now, maybe, a typhoon did come along and rip a pretty big hole in the roof. So I'm very glad we aren't still living under it, and we're getting ready to take the house down.
Good decision.
That's right. Very validating.
So, Sarah, how long did it take you to adjust to things like the money being different in Japan? I know I studied abroad in New Zealand and never did get the hang of, like, in the money you grow up with, what a quarter looks like. Like, you don't have to think about which one's which. But switching currencies, and I'm sure languages as well, has got to be, it's hard to understand how much effort it takes to exist in a place that's different.
Yes. Yeah. I think sort of a lot of the smaller things sort of adjust fairly quickly. So like the money, rather conveniently, 1 yen is relatively close to 1 penny money-wise. So it's actually fairly easy to track. But I mean, the language, of course, is exhausting. And then at this point, it's a lot of like, when I run up against a wall that I wasn't expecting. So it's something like, I still can't get a credit card. I basically, I've lived here my whole entire life, but I basically sort of don't exist. I can't get a credit card. I've been rejected for lots of like bank accounts. I've been trying to register, because we're taking down the house. We're trying to get a trailer so that we can have a place to stay out on the farm. And I can't for the life of me figure out how to register it. I just don't seem to exist well enough. Or it's things like,
are you a citizen yet, Sarah?
No. So Japan does not allow dual citizenship, which is challenging. Yeah. So I have permanent residency, which is good, but the pandemic has sort of really shone a light on how much that doesn't seem to matter to the government very much.
Right.
So that's been challenging. They've gone back on it now, but they just last week announced no more flights. They said no more people who don't have existing reservations coming in. And then they walked it back to like, well, citizens can still make reservations. And they've now said, well, maybe we'll help permanent residents too. But it's that sort of instability. It's that hit of like, well, I have friends who, took this sort of seeming lull, the seeming quiet time to go like see their children who are studying back at home, and who now, can they come home? They don't know. I have friends who, I was able to, travel back and see my mom over the summer, but, I have friends who weren't able to, and who, now maybe won't be able to. So that's been a bit.
Yeah, that would be nerve-wracking to think that, if you wanted to go visit family or something, that you might end up stranded and not able to get back into the country.
Yes.
How does your family work in terms of language? Because you got your daughters when they were older, presumably they weren't speaking English when they came into your family. So do you speak Japanese with them, or do you speak English as well? Or how does that work?
Yeah, well, so initially, because our first daughter was 2 when she came, so initially we were doing a lot more English. My husband and I speak English together because his English is better than my Japanese. But because our other daughter was older, she was 10 when she came, we felt it was more important, to have sort of a feeling of unity. So I sort of dropped a lot of the English speaking, and we speak Japanese together mostly. And my Japanese is okay. I can get by. Sort of like casual conversation with the kids is not really a problem. Although occasionally it'll be like, they need something for school and we have to sort of sit down and figure it out together. But yeah, we pretty much do just Japanese and don't worry about it so much. They study English in school, so they both know some.
So, Sarah, do you find that you dream in Japanese or still in English?
Oh, I think there's some of both. There's definitely some of both. Yeah.
In one of
Like,
the in the farming group that we're in together, you've posted before about some of the, what I say, wildlife that you have to deal with that we probably don't around here. Can you enlighten us on some of the pests, and other than fast growing bamboo, what are some of the other
Yes.
things that you have to contend with that we probably don't?
Well, we are the original home of those murder hornets that you folks have been hearing about. Um, we do have those.
You're welcome.
Yes. So we have, though they are, we kept bees for a while, and those hornets do attack bees. So they are a notable presence, and they also go after fruit. So like they'll go after the figs on the fig trees, or we have persimmons falling out of the trees now, so they'll go after those. So they are, they are scary. They are giants, and they are aggressive. So we have them, and then we have vipers. I think they're pit vipers. So a venomous snake that basically you are just real careful to not ever go into any sort of tall grass without at
Right.
least having real good boots on. So we got
another
them.
reason to not let those fields grow up in any weeds, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And then the wild boar are a big thing where we are right now. We lost almost all of our squash crop to them this year.
Oh, wow.
There's almost always something. Yeah, that one was I was real excited. That was sort of a project I was working on. And I had all these, not quite right, but they're coming along nicely squash.
Yes,
And
okay.
then, well, yep, exactly. And then we lost them. So that's too bad. So I do spend a lot of time and energy making fences to keep them out.
Mhm.
And then off in the hills, there's monkeys and there's deer, but I don't think we've had them come down. They're more about like a once in a while, maybe you'll see them sort of thing.
Right. Climate wise, what is it like where you live?
Well, so both colder and hotter than where I grew up in coastal Northern California.
All the extremes.
That's right. We've been having a lot of, as everywhere, of course, hotter than ever summers, record-breaking summers. So our summers are usually hot and humid. Usually there's a lot of thunderstorms, but this last year we had a record-breakingly dry summer. But we get typhoons a little bit in the fall. Usually we're in a more protected area, but again, as everywhere else, more extreme storms. So we've been getting them more a bit lately. And then in the winter, we tend to have dry, clear weather a lot. It gets cold. We get -5 is a pretty common overnight temperature. I think -10 is sort of the coldest it's ever been, sort of a temperature.
Celsius
But
or
it's sunny and
Fahrenheit?
clear.
Sorry, I need to
Celsius.
check.
That's right. Celsius.
See,
Yes.
see, we're speaking the same language now, Kate. We'll have to do the
That's right.
translating into Fahrenheit.
We need like a Babel fish from Hitchhiker's Guide
Yes.
to help us with this Celsius and Fahrenheit
Below
situation.
freezing.
Yeah. Goes, I guess it'll be probably in the 20s. It's probably, so the overnights are probably in the 20s, but we don't get a lot of snow. So nothing like what either of you deal with, I think.
We don't get nearly as much as we used to either.
Yeah.
So Sarah, what does the future look like with your daughters and with the farm and the business and that? Are you hoping that they'll take over? Or are they out of there as soon as your younger daughter hits 18? Like, what's your
Yeah.
farm families, man?
That's right.
Just leave
Yeah.
it at that.
That's right. You guys both have sort of, generations of pressure building on you. And we don't have that. So that's probably nice for the kids. Or on the other hand, maybe the security is a nice thing that you guys have got that our kids don't have. But for our older daughter, she went to a vocational high school studying food preparation. And now she's in a 2-year vocational program, also studying food. She would like to find a job and sort of be on her own a bit is sort of her plans, but things are hard and we'll see how it goes. So if she's able to do that, then that's wonderful and we'll let her. But if it's, things are hard. If that doesn't come together for her, we're also able to give her either a full-time or a part-time job with us. And we've been sort of doing the math a little bit lately as she'll be officially a fully an adult at 20 in Japan, although they've changed the law. So our youngest will be out of here at 18. but we've worked out that if she works even part-time for the company, we can, as part of her pay, we can have the company give her like a housing stipend, have the company provide her housing. So we have sort of a really nice little safety net for her built into that, which has been reassuring to sort of figure out. Because as I said, she has some neurodiversities, and, just sort of jumping 2 feet out into the big wide world is a scary step for anyone. So we'll see what sort of works out, what she wants to do. Our youngest, I keep trying to convince her that she wants to have a fancy gift shop with our stuff in it in the department store. But currently she wants to be a hairdresser. So that's fine. She can do that.
People will always need hairdressers. It's a pretty
Exactly.
solid career, I think.
Yes. Yeah, I think so too.
Have several friends with kids with different levels of disabilities, and planning ahead for their futures is a real thing that I never really considered,
That's right.
how to support kids and still let them lead their own lives, which is, I guess, basically the goal of raising children, all the way around. But it's definitely more complicated when
That's
the kid
right.
is going to need more support, even, through adulthood.
That's right. Yeah. And it's a little hard to sort of balance letting them try things versus, making sure you've got something in place. You don't want to take over the planning too much, but, you also want to set them up for success as much as possible. So I got to say, Arlene was really helpful when I was having a bit of a crisis a little bit ago. Just trying to figure out where my head was going to be at. But we're feeling like we've got sort of a few different levels of possibility sort of set up now, which is very, very calming for me as a parent. She's probably still feeling pretty out there, but
I imagine too, going from such a structured school environment into the world, obviously that works for a lot of people. If you're going straight into a career, then that's great, but because of the amount of time they have been spending in school and the potentially lack of life skills as a result, the way you talked about it. I mean, obviously she's going to have food handling, so that's a good life skill to have. But there's other components that, once that structure of schooling isn't there anymore, then that opens people up to, recognizing that there's maybe some vulnerabilities or things they hadn't really had to do before.
That's right. That's right.
It just so happens that Katie's daughter and mine have the same birthday, but mine's turning 16 and is excited to go and try to get her driver's license. So that's a whole other layer of potential stress. I'm sure she obviously, being a farm kid, she does have more experience with driving tractors and the side by side and things like that. So she does have some experience behind the wheel. But the other day she said she'd just driven the vehicle over to the gas tank that we have on the farm, and she's like, wow, the brakes are really responsive. You don't have to jam them down quite as hard as on a tractor. I was like, no, you don't.
Well, better learning that at home than on the highway.
So Sarah, are there county fairs in Japan, or what is the equivalent community celebration?
So there's not a county fair, but there are a lot of sort of seasonal festivals. So I think we could probably count that as fairly similar.
Okay, so if you were going to dominate a county fair or seasonal festival category, so, little kids and sweet old ladies, what category would it be in?
So I thought I had a good answer for this last night as I was making dinner. I can do a pretty good job of like a really quick looking meal when there seems to be nothing in the house. Now, I haven't been to a county fair where that's an option, but using our imagination a bit, my daughter did complain after I served it last night, but she did also eat it. So making something out of nothing, I think I could show up.
Quick, though. You didn't say delicious.
Right.
Fast.
Exactly. So. Fast and acceptable. She did eat it. Nothing fancy. Definitely, I would not win any fancy competitions. I am no good at the fancy, but quick and sort of sufficient. It's enough. Mm-hmm. Good enough for government work, as my mom used to say. I think I could nail that.
I'm guessing probably brownies too, but since that's the main part of your bakery business.
Yes. I definitely do make a solid gluten-free brownie. So if there is a category for gluten-free brownies, and you can bring your own homemade flour, then I could probably make a good showing there.
So, Sarah, other question, and I'm just going to add this in, hard
Yeah.
hitting journalism. So, for my work, I deal with a lot of computer accounts and, catch spammers. And we get a lot of spam from Southeast Asia about gambling. And today I saw one, normally it's boxing and like soccer, because they'll list all the things you can bet on. So it's like boxing, soccer, cockfighting. But today I saw one that was boxing, soccer, cockfighting, and tofu throwing.
I've
I'd
never
never
heard
seen
of that.
this before.
No, no, neither have I.
But I mean, in all fairness, like I would pay to watch that, I guess. And
I mean, yeah, it's the vegetarian version.
yeah, people
Maybe
watch
it's at
curling.
some kind of community festival that.
Yeah, there must probably is one out there. My husband had a job for a while pulling a direct sales tofu cart, going from place to place in Tokyo, selling tofu out of a cart for a little bit while we stayed with his mom in Tokyo.
So
No
Sarah,
throwing that I know of.
2 more questions. How far do you think you could throw a block of tofu?
Yeah, well, I think if we channel some of the rage at the end of a day, let's see.
Would depend on the size of the tofu, of course.
That's right. I'm thinking that we've got, our chickens live inside of sort of a greenhouse, like a hoop house greenhouse. And I mean, I could, we toss stuff in there for them to eat. I could definitely go to the back of the hoop house. I don't really know how far that is. 20 meters? Is that 20 meters? I don't know if that's very far for tofu. Did they give, specs in the email?
No, and I kind of ignored it when I came across it, and then I just spent the rest of the day thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, I feel like maybe I would pay for that. Yeah.
Yeah, like the soft tofu versus like a block of
That's
extra
right.
firm, or like
That's right.
And
is it in the package? Absolutely. Well, next time I'm feeding the chickens, and we got I think there is some expired tofu from my fridge that needs to go to the chickens, actually, because I keep buying food and then not actually making it into those meals I said I was so proud of. So I'll let you know how it goes. That's right. Yeah, that's right. I'll set up a video of see how far I can go.
No, seriously, we'll put it on our TikTok. We're up to like 3 subscribers, and I feel like they're probably going to want us to actually do something pretty soon.
There you go.
They're waiting.
Well, and it's clearly an important internet keyword, so it'll do wonders for your account. I'll see what I can do.
All of our followers are members of Arlene's family, but. And second question, how do we cook tofu so it's not weird? Just enough people eat it that I feel like there must be ways to make it better.
Yeah, well, so I think
Like,
I really think I got you.
A tremendous amount of the population.
I think the thing is that tofu is sort of introduced to American cuisine as a meat substitute, which is not really necessarily what it is. So I think you sort of have to move away from the idea of it being a replacement for something, and using it as a separate dish. So you want to make sure you drain it because it's packed in water. So you got to get the water it's packed in out. So you want to make sure you drain it. That's really important. A really easy and always tasty way to go. You drain the tofu, you get the hard tofu, the momin tofu, slice it up, maybe like, it could be like, so anywhere between a half an inch and an inch thick, make some slices, and then some flour. I do rice flour because that's what I have. So maybe flour or starch, sort of bread it. And deep fry it. Can't go wrong with that.
Deep fried.
Exactly. Exactly. And then, then when it's all nice and crispy and toasty and brown, you can, have some soy sauce, put some ginger on there. I think that's the way to go. I mean, I think the mistake, yes. Yeah. The mistake is sort of, this is a health food. You must eat it in a healthy way. So scrap that, it's not a replacement. It's not a health food. It's just a food. Deep fry it and it'll be delicious. I promise.
Yeah, I feel like maybe I was vegetarian for a number of years in high school, and I feel like the way it was served, because I went to a boarding school, so we ate a lot of cafeteria style food, was very plain tofu mixed into things in place of meat, and then everybody be like,
exactly,
just like meat, you can't even tell the difference.
Exactly.
What have you guys been eating? You can't tell the difference.
Yes. Yes, you'll have like a tofu scramble. It's just like scrambled eggs. No, it's really not. It's
No,
not
it's
like
not.
scrambled eggs. It's a different thing.
Which is fine because it is a different thing.
Exactly.
Okay, well that's good to know that
Mhm.
we're just doing it wrong.
Yeah. It's the sort of the mysticism of the fancy food from outside. It's not that. Just, skip that. Find a recipe that's from a place where tofu's a normal food and use that.
Fair enough. I like it.
That seems like a perfect segue into the cussing and discussing section. So as always, if any listeners would like to submit their cussing and discussing, you can email us at barnyardlanguage@gmail.com or send us a private message on either Facebook or Instagram. Katie, do you have anything to cuss or discuss today?
You know I always do, Arlene.
Well, yeah.
As I
shouldn't
mentioned
make it a
earlier,
question.
I moved my desk over, and since I work for a tech company and record a podcast and that, I thought, well, I'll set up dual monitors. And what the hell is the matter with tech companies that we cannot standardize what the plugs are for things and how many plugs there are for things? And I just have such a hot mess of wires and adapters and just bullshit. And, like the mic has to be connected no more than one connection away from the computer or it doesn't work. I had a conversation with my new boss at 9 a.m. today and my webcam wouldn't work, which working for a tech company looks super slick, when you're like wrestling your laptop open because your camera doesn't work. It just standardize the damn things. It just makes me mad. It's just stupid. I just want it to be easier. Anyway, Arlene, what have you got today?
So my cussing today is the winter clothing. There's just too much of it. And we've got 3 boys, so everything's black, which is great until you try and tell them apart and figure out whose snow pants are whose. And then we've also got the added barn element. So then you're trying to figure out everybody's second set of barn stuff so that all their school stuff doesn't smell like barn stuff. So then you have to do a second round of snowsuits and boots and toques and mitts and all the stuff. And there's too much of it. And winter is crummy anyway. So yeah, just winter stuff. There's too much.
I'm feeling that the daycare asked us to bring a whole set of winter clothing to stay at daycare, which is totally understandable. All of our local stores have been out of snow pants for several weeks already. We haven't gotten any snow yet, and you already can't buy any snow pants.
Yeah, that's
and it
right.
just it makes me mad that everybody's like, well, shop locally, and I'm like, well, cool, but they don't have them. I can't do it if they won't stock it. And Arlene, how did you pronounce this word for the thing you put on your head?
It's a toque. I'm Canadian. This is what we
No,
call
I just always assumed it was
hat.
toque.
No, toque.
Like a chef's toque. So
or like marijuana. No, toque.
No, Arlene. How did the marijuana harvest go up there, Arlene? Did they finish that yet?
I don't know. All the plants got stolen. Although I did have I got a couple of family, not my plants. I don't grow it, but other people do. After our podcast where we talked about people getting their pot plants stolen, I had a couple of family members let me know that it's 3 plants is what each person is allowed. So if anyone wanted to know, I was informed by some family members that 3 is the magic number. So now you know.
It just never occurred to me that growing pot had a season.
Well, I guess you're doing it outside.
I don't know. I'm basically the uncoolest person in the world. So,
Sarah,
whatever.
do you have anything to cuss and discuss?
Sorry,
with
Sarah.
Oh, that's okay. I've been giggling along with you. It's nice. Honestly, may I just cuss banks? I promise banks,
For
I
sure.
don't have a money laundering amount of money. You could just let me bank. I promise I'm not trying to money launder. I'm just trying to live and pay my bills and stuff. I have a bank in the US that wants I don't know. I think they want my PIN number from 2001 or something.
Oh,
I don't know. And they won't let me in. And I have my banks in Japan that won't, there's a separate pin for the internet bank, but the postcard didn't come. I don't know. It's too hard. It's too hard. I give up.
Especially when you're not a real person and they won't let you do anything.
Exactly. Well, that's
You
why I
can't
don't
have a credit
banks with
card,
any
but
of
you
the
can
good
also
banks.
have your money.
Yes, that is exactly it. I thought, well, at least I thought I had a debit card I could pay for things with, but it turns out, no, we don't. I just have money I can't get to.
Our friend Kevin submitted our very first listener addition to our cussing and discussing segment, so we're going to go ahead and add that in right here.
Goddamn fucking haylage bales keep freezing. Gets worse and worse the longer this cold spell goes. And I'm getting frustrated because it's too fucking hard to feed fucking cows because it all sticks together in one big frozen fucking block. And I'm mad right now. That's it. Okay, I've calmed down a little bit more. Found my pry bar so I can pry apart the flakes to feed them out. So that'll work. At least they're large squares of baleage. I've had to deal with frozen solid large rounds of haylage before, and man, I had to use a chainsaw, some combination of a chainsaw, an axe, and a pry bar to get that apart. Not fun. Anyways, hope everybody else is enjoying the winter.
Anyway,
Sarah, do you have any social media or accounts that people can follow if they want to learn more about the farm or the business, even just to check out and see if you have any pit viper photos?
I think that my husband updates our Facebook page, but that'll be in Japanese. Facebook will translate it, but not always reliably. So
Not well.
just don't believe everything you read there, but there are usually photos. And so the name of our sort of whole deal which is the name of a bird. It's Hototogisu. And if you just put in Hototogi's farm or Hototogi's bakery, eventually you'll probably find us. There's also a ramen shop in Tokyo, but they also look nice. You might enjoy their pictures as well.
We can follow them.
That's right.
So, Sarah, one more question before we wrap up. If a pit viper and a wild boar were going to, duke it out, I don't know how they would because there's some obvious problems here. Who do you think
Are
would
there?
win?
I'm pretty sure it would be the viper. I think the viper would probably win. They just hang out and sit there ready to bite you if you don't watch where you're going. We did one.
Viper does seem like they'd have an advantage in the stealth department over any sort of pig-related situation.
I think so. I think they just jump up and bite them on the nose before the tusks could get them. I would lose to them both. No question there. I would lose to either of them, but pit them against each other, and I think the snake wins.
Well, that's good to know. Anyway, thank you for joining us, Sarah. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of Barnyard Language. You can find us on all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, where Sarah will be posting that video of the tofu throwing. As Barnyard Language, and on Twitter, we are Barnyard Pod. Join the private Facebook group to hang out with us and other farm families. We would appreciate it if you would like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast, and leaving a review is a great way to help us reach more listeners.
We would welcome your submissions for future guests for the podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest, please get in touch. You can support the show by becoming a patron on the Barnyard Language Patreon.